Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. Today on our podcast, we'll be talking about how the Brewers wrapped up their 2022 season. And unfortunately, yes, I did say wrapped up. And then we're also going to do our annual postseason predictions here with the crew. And joining me today, we've got, of course, Vince Travato, Scott Bartel. We've got a special guest, not Chad Collins, but
filling in for Chad. Yeah,
I was going to say, is it Chad Collins? But no, filling in partially for Chad is a longtime fan and a longtime friend of mine. Longtime fan of the show, though, Mr. Vikram Paragakar. How's it going, Vik?
Hey, guys. Nice to be on the show today.
There he is. Vikram's in the house.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're actually just leaving the Brewers game, guys. Got a quick last-minute trip up to Milwaukee and wanted to check out this final series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So we went this evening and leaving a Brewers victory at least. So it's a happy Tuesday night.
the Brewers beat the likely NL Simon runner-up probably in Zach Gallen, I'm guessing, or at least he'll be a top finisher. So that was a pretty big accomplishment. And Eric Lauer had 6 no-hit innings. I call it a no quality start. It was first ever for the Brewers. And they pulled after 6. I guess they were saving them for the off season or whatever. So that's cool. All right. Well, bring home the victory,
so
guys.
We said in the stands tonight too, Craig. We were saying the exact same thing. Vikram and my brother Joe and I were talking like, what are you saving him for? We actually did the math on how long it's going to be till spring training. Like, I guess you don't want to.
He could literally recover from Tommy John surgery by then. But anyway,
what to ask with our press passes? I'll head back to the clubhouse here and ask Craig.
Yeah. So, and there might be a theme of this podcast. Interesting things that the Brewers front office and everyone has been doing this or during this season. But anyway, all right. Well, since our last podcast, obviously we were talking about how the Brewers, with I think 3 weeks left to play, still had a chance for one of the final wild cards. And going into, thanks to the Phillies, they have a pretty awful month, just like us. We did have a pretty decent chance going into the final 9-game homestand against the Cardinals, Marlins, and Diamondbacks. However, it was not in the cards, no pun intended. The fish get up, and we only took 1 of 4 in the final set against the Marlins and basically ended any chance of our wild card hopes. So the Brewers will be missing the playoffs for the first time in 5 seasons. It made it 4 consecutive, which of course was a club record. Fortunately, that streak comes to a screeching end, even though it did come down to the wire here. Kind of disappointing, obviously, overall. What is your guys' take on, how the Brewers kind of the season played out, I guess, here, especially at the end?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously a disappointing September. I think that, there was a bit of optimism again at the beginning of the month, just because traditionally, you hear about Craig Tember and Craig Counsell having good managerial record in September, and that can be true in other years. But for me, the momentum had really changed around, I guess, two events that we've talked about at length on this podcast. But one being the sort of weird letting go of Lorenzo Cain, and then of course the Josh Hader trade at the deadline. And I think that there's some intangibles that kind of changed fundamentally in the clubhouse at that point with both of those moves. That you hear some of the quotes from Christian Yelich that he told our colleague Adam McCalvey yesterday, and just that this team never really gelled. And for players to come out and talk to the media as bluntly as guys like Christian Yelich and Eric Lauer and Devin Williams have this year has been a bit of a surprise to me, which really tells me that the problem is even worse than they were originally kind of portrayed. And I think that the Josh Hader trade was really the catalyst, though, for this team's demise. Not so much playing slightly under 500 in September. I will say I did see one stat, Scott, that your interns can confirm, but I believe that the Brewers have 15 blown saves since the Josh Hader trade.
Which is the most on base.
Yeah. Pretty rough.
Most major league. Yeah.
So obviously, everyone can. The optimists can also point to the fact that Josh Hader really did very poorly for the Padres, especially right after the trade. But he has kind of righted the ship, and they are making the playoffs, and we're staying home. So I mean, it really was playing out that the Padres were barely making one of the wild cards as well. So I mean, had they not had Hader, and we still had Hader, there's, in my opinion, there's a good chance we would have been one of the wild cards. So I mean, it's just hard to justify what.
Yeah.
I just don't understand their train of thought or what their overall I mean, are they sitting as a first place team going and trade? Are they looking at like a 2-year window and trying to put the best team together for next year, but not this year? I mean,
well, and Frank, not to, I know we've talked about this, and not to rehash all this again, but I feel very strongly about it. I don't. It's not the trading Hader that bothers me so much as trading Hader and not getting pieces back to help you in a year that you're at that time in first place in the division. I mean, the Milwaukee Brewers do not have a world championship. The Milwaukee Brewers do not have a lot of postseason experience. Looking at the entirety of the history of the franchise, I mean, anytime that we're in first, if I'm the GM, I think that you got to go for it, quite frankly, and make the best of it. So I certainly, again, it's not about Josh Hader. It's about trading Josh Hader for guys that, even under the best case scenario with this trade, clearly haven't helped us much in 2022. And I'm still maybe a little bit more bullish than others on a couple of the younger pieces that we got back. I think that Ruiz is going to be a good piece on this team eventually, but I don't think that this is the year, and we got some pitching as well, but I don't think that this is the year that we needed to do that. And I don't know why you do that without also adding something to your team as well. And if we didn't do that, even if there were other things that were quote unquote lined up that fell through, I still think that that's a failure on the front office's part to not plan adequately for that and not to give yourself enough time to readjust and go to a plan B, so that, if you trade Josh Hader and you expect to acquire Josh Bell, for instance, who also hasn't hit much since the deadline, but just for example's sake, if you aren't able to do that because Josh Bell suddenly gets packaged in a separate trade with San Diego, then you at least have time to go to a plan B if you're not doing this at the last minute. And I think that was kind of an understated strength of Doug Melvin's, who was able to go out and get a guy like CC 2 weeks before the deadline, or 3 weeks before the deadline, even a week before the All-Star break. He did it with K-Rod as well. So, again, I think Stearns has a lot of strengths, but I don't think his deadline management is one of them.
Well, I think actually, just since you brought up Ruiz, I will say that I think he's going to have a little more value next year because, in theory, if you can only throw over to first twice, you would think that there's going to be more stolen bases next year.
Right.
And you would think that he might have a little more value, but I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to just say, you know what, Josh Hader got traded. Let's look at what we did for the bullpen, because it's kind of like Moneyball, right? When Giambi leaves the A's and they say, well, we're just going to fill in with 3 other people and we're going to get the same production. So we did that with Bush, who didn't pitch very well, Rogers, who did not pitch very well, and Rosenthal, who didn't pitch at all. So, I mean, unfortunately, it was one of those things that probably on paper it looked pretty solid, but we just ran into a little bit more of that reliever volatility that we keep talking about.
Yeah, and I've said to you guys before in our text thread, it was almost like the front office was trying to be too cute or something with this deadline. It was like, hey, obviously we need 2 bats. Why don't we just go and trade our all-star reliever for relievers who aren't as good and some prospects? It was like, what are you overthinking here? I don't understand. And clearly that showed with our lack of offense this past weekend against Miami. I mean, it was really frustrating to see the Brewers, that Sunday game. I mean, as dramatic and fun as it was to watch at the time, it was excruciating in the way that the Brewers were not able to pull that out. And the fact that we were eliminated essentially because of losing that game after we had multiple opportunities in extra innings, just because our offense can push through, 1 extra run. It just kind of summed up everything about, unfortunately, this season and this team. I can't remember a team in at least recent Brewers history that's been as talented but has found as many ways to lose. I mean, it's been a while, and I think you've got to go back to a number like 15 years ago at least for a team like that. Maybe 2014, I guess, but they weren't nearly as talented as this group.
Well, look,
You have to go back to the Bleach Boys. Remember that? Richie Sexton, Jerry Burnett. Who's the other guy? I think the catcher. I don't know.
Tyler Houston. Was it Tyler Houston? Tyler Houston, right?
I think so.
I don't know.
What do you think? Tyler Houston? What's the other Bleach boy in the Brewers?
Well, wasn't it Sexton, Burnett, and Burnett's? Wasn't it? Did Jenkins do that?
Oh, maybe.
I think
Jenkins
he was included.
He must have been. He's clearly a California guy.
Frosted those tips.
Yeah. It was the 90s and the early 2000s. You could do whatever you wanted back then. Great.
This is a simpler time.
Texas did it as well. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, say this is just making it as frustrating as a Brewer fan to taking a 2022 season when it was really so much promise, especially coming off of last offseason where we got ousted the Braves in our first playoff series, when I really felt that we had a strong roster top to bottom and could make a serious World Series run as division winners last year, with on the backs of Corbin Burns signing award caliber season. And it was a disappointing end. And then to have this season after that, it's just like a double whammy for Brewer fans. But if you really look at it, with the trade deadline folly aside, I guess I'll put it that way. At this organization, we basically have our former MVP, Christian Yelich, over the course of the last couple of years, turning into a pumpkin. You had our most promising prospect, Keston Hiura, who was coming on to be a middle of the lineup hitter at some point, basically turn into a pumpkin. And then this season, I mean, our former and recent trade acquisition, who I think we really wanted to be a key offensive piece, Louis Urias, in some ways turned into a pumpkin as well, really not his promise. And there's other guys as well, not to single those three out, but I mean, when you have all three of those things happen, your offense is going to suffer greatly. And it kind of just is befuddling to me that last offseason or this trade deadline, what the Brewers, how they addressed their shortcomings in offense were left much to be desired. And unfortunately, the small market reality of that is the fact that Christian Yelich's contract probably, did not allow the Brewers to add the pieces via offense that they really need. And in order to add someone, they would have had to done it via trade by giving up a lot of their top flight prospects to add someone like we had wanted, like last offseason, like a Matt Olson to your lineup. And they just weren't willing to do that as an organization to make it kind of go for it move with their offense. And here we are, a season and a half later, and left out of the playoffs. So, I mean, I think hope for next season, but I almost, it pains me to think that maybe there's not a lot of flexibility with the payroll to fix our offense going forward. And even though there's some
Craig, that's a great question. I don't mean to interrupt. I was just going to ask you though. Do you guys think that is this an Atanasio issue? Is this a Stearns/Arnold issue? I mean, is it the owner saying you are going to only work within these constraints, or is it Stearns, and Arnold and that team trying to, make puzzle pieces fit, that are just wrong? I mean, I guess that's my fundamental question about the state of the Brewers organization right now is like, where is the disconnect coming from, and why is it that the Brewers can't take that next step? Because I hate to say it, but this window, we've got 2 years, guys. I mean, the starting rotation is not going to get any better than Woodruff, Burns, Peralta, most likely, and with Eric Flowers, your 4 starter. I don't see that as being easily replaceable at best. So I think the 2 years is we got to go for it in this window.
Well, here's the problem I have with that. I'm a little afraid that the window is actually 1 year, because you can't just get a pick for like Corbin Burns if he walks in 2 years. So you have Burns, Woodruff, and who's the other one? Adames are all with us for the next 2 years. You know, hopefully, obviously, we can extend, you know, one of them maybe, but I don't know. I think that this organization might be a little gun shy after throwing out the Yelich deal, and that obviously hasn't gone the way that they wanted it to at this point, I guess. But I don't know. So it makes me wonder if we have a 1 year window and somebody like Burns or Woodruff gets traded, you know, within the next year or so. So I don't know.
You might not be wrong about that, Scott. I think that Burns is the more likely to go in a trade scenario. I mean, I think that number one, he's got more value, and number two, I think his contract demands are going to be more or less likely that the Brewers can match something that I want or demand on the open market. I could see Woodruff being a little bit more eager to extend as well, but that's a great point. And you know, you could make the argument you could still keep those guys if you're truly just going to bottle up and go for one, or you know, for even their contract walk here. But yeah, you might be right. Maybe it is just a 1 year window. And if that's the case, why didn't we take a bigger shot at it this year, though? I mean, when we had, as Craig pointed out many times, how many times in Brewers history? The answer is never. Have we had the best starting pitcher in the league and the best closer? And that's what the Brewers had for last year and, you know, half of the season.
Yeah,
And it's pretty disappointing.
Yeah. So I mean,
I think the other thing that probably has to get pointed out as well is, you know, next year obviously they're gonna have more of that scheduling parity. You're not gonna play as many games within the division, and you know, we had a cake division. We had a lot of trash in our division, and we had like the weakest strength of schedule this year, except for one other team, and that was the Cardinals, because they had to play everyone else in our division too, and us. So I don't know.
That's a great point.
I feel like we let one get away.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about the division and how that is changing next year. And I think since our last podcast, the 2023 schedule has been released. As a side note here to our listeners, and the Brewers do open up on the road against the Cubs at Wrigley Field, and the home opener is set for a series against the New York Mets, I believe.
do we finish at home next year?
That's a good question. Scott, you'll be back for the final homestand, I'm sure, next year. Have you checked?
Hope so,
I
yeah.
don't know. We'll see, I guess.
There's always hope. Brewer fans have to have that at least.
Yeah. Gotta keep that going.
Well, I think we'll have all off season to talk about plans for next year for the Brewers, but it really feels like a go for it year. And I mean, we have a lot of young guys that we called up, and our distributors like Garrett Mitchell, you know, on the offensive side, and as you mentioned, Esteury Ruiz, and
Bryce Terang.
Right.
I think the Terang could definitely be a key piece next year. Actually,
I guess Wong has a club option. I believe it's at 10 million or so. So whether pick that up would be kind of interesting. I almost feel that they're going to, but maybe it'd be money best spent elsewhere if Trang and at second base, and actually Ruiz has second base experience in minor leagues as well.
I kind of had this brainstorm earlier today, and I don't know how likely it might be, but I was thinking, I guess your point that you were just making, Craig, of the three guys that you listed, Yelich and Urias are the top two biggest disappointments from that list. Here, I think, was kind of mismanaged again for like the second or third season in a row, but that's a whole other story. But Urias really disappointed me. I think he's got value, but I think that his value is really going to be as a platoon guy going forward. I don't think he can be our starting third baseman. I would actually be very interested to kind of play through some scenarios of maybe Adames even going and being our starting third baseman next year, because the third base market is not good. I think that Adames could play there, and I think that you could have Terang as your shortstop in theory under that scenario. I think it's kind of a cheaper way to replace or to find a third baseman, and keeping Urias as a platoon guy, I think, gets him where he's strongest, which I think is very important. So that's just one thought that I had earlier today, and I didn't hear that from our anonymous source, Tom Carter, but I would be interested to hear your guys' thoughts.
Well, my first thought is TC is going to be upset again because he's anonymous, and
Oh yeah.
but yeah,
Oh.
Did you know Tom
Man, we
Carter?
might have busted.
Yeah, you don't know? He's anonymous.
no offense to Bryce Terang or to you, Vince, but I kind of disagree with your assessment. Unfortunately, I actually think Louis Urias has quite a bit higher of a major league regular ceiling than Bryce Terang does. I hate to say it. So with that being said, I could be wrong, obviously, but and Bryce Terang, Adames just set the Brewer record for most home runs by a shortstop, beating Rob Yountz at 31. I have a hard time believing they'll move him off short because his defense is at least more than adequate there as well. But in order,
but that's exactly what the Brewers did with Robin Yount after he set that record. They moved him to center field.
You're right, absolutely, yeah. So who knows? But I think there's enough guys to plug in. If we don't bring Wong back, there is a couple of options. And I think Terang also has experience in minor leagues at second base. So, but if they did bring back Wong, then obviously Terang would, if you want to slot him in the starting lineup, your scenario would make some sense. So, I do think that Garrett Mitchell almost, unless we, depending on what we do with the rest of our outfield, I almost think that he could have a starter's role handed to him going into spring training, and so as a center fielder. Now that Kane is gone and we really don't have that great of a center field option. Ruiz also is a center fielder, but like I said, he's got some infield, experience too. So we'll see. And so I guess it really feels like the Brewers have a lot of pieces to move around, and I don't think that they'll probably be making a huge free agent splash on the offensive side. And that's the frustrating thing, is because I really feel that we're relying too much on these rookies coming up. The hitters like Mitchell and Terang and Ruiz, even we're counting on multiple of these guys to become everyday regulars, and I think that's asking a lot. And not only that, but we really need to find a franchise middle order hitter to replace the fact that we really don't have one. And as great of a season as Rowdy Tellez has, I don't necessarily think he's more than like a complimentary piece. He's not necessarily a franchise hitter, even though he's a good cleanup hitter. But Adames is, almost hands down the best hitter at this point. So wherever you put him, I don't know that it matters. His bat will be in the lineup. He did have a great season, even as a non-shortstop. So yeah, I think the Brewers all have options going forward, definitely for the 2023 offense. But it's just hard for me to envision who we're going to bring in that's not a rookie to help this team, because I don't think a couple of rookies with some potential are going to fix this offense. No way. So, I mean, I would love to.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that that's not the Brewers' plan or answer for this. I think that you use those younger guys to sort of supplement what I hope is an offseason that we really do go and acquire an actual big bat. I don't know who that's going to be or where. I'd be interested in, we got to look through some. We'll talk about, I'm sure, potential trades or free agent signings in future episodes when the season is behind us and the World Series is done. But I do think that there's got to be a bigger splash. And hey, I love Andrew McCutchen as a guy, as a leader, as a player. I like him a lot, but he's not the guy that may take you to the next level. I guess at the end of the day, you don't want to sign somebody whose best years are still behind them. You want to find somebody that is kind of still on the upswing. I think that the Brewers really have to make a splash in this offseason.
Yeah, I think that in order to do so, they're going to have to be willing to part with some of the young talent that has, either on the cusp of making the majors or have already made the majors, and be willing to part like that. I mean, obviously we saw Ethan Small have kind of down season in the minor leagues. He's someone who could have probably brought someone back a pretty significant piece either last offseason or at the trade deadline. And as you can see, even in the minor leagues, these guys, their value can decrease even before they make it to the majors. With that being said, you can never really have too much pitching. And the fact that we locked up Aaron Ashby long-term and we've got Freddie Peralta long-term, those are some nice complementary pieces that you can slot in the rotation for years to come. And so as you guys said, I think it's going to have to be a strategy. The Brewers need to identify whether or not they can give an extension to Burns or Woodruff well in advance of them becoming free agents. And if they determine they can sign one of them, to probably do that. And then for the other one, unfortunately, find an opportune time then to trade them for a haul that'll bring back a potential franchise hitter. Unfortunately, there's just no scenario where we're going to have Burns and Woodruff beyond their free agent, their arbitration years, like both of them.
Yeah.
I should mention. So I think that's an important thing that they have to figure out. And of course, everyone will prefer it to be Burns. And again, he's going to finish in the top 5, I'd imagine, or so. And I'll sign Warren voting with this season he had this year as well. This year's actual wins. So, I mean, the Brewers have to take advantage and try to go for it next year. So 2023 year could be a huge year for the Milwaukee Brewers, and it almost needs to be at this point. So I mean,
actually on that point, Craig, I'm sticking around here on the set, but Vikram has to depart. He's a busy man with many moves. And what are your quick thoughts to wrap up your thoughts for 2023?
Brewers are going to win it all next year.
Winning it all, guys. That's it. It's been predicted.
All right.
Nice.
Our first prediction.
Judge to the Brewers, you said. Okay. He's had a few ciders.
We'll replay that clip next year during the World Series parade here on the Brew Crew Review Podcast.
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. So, yeah, Vikram, thanks for being a Brewer fan. Of course, a Brew Crew Review Podcast fan. We appreciate it. Big fan of the show over the years. Really happy to finally have him on the show. So,
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vikram.
Have a good night. Yeah, so again, a disappointing end to the 2022 season for the Brewers, missing on the playoffs just barely, but honestly, I just did not think that we had it in us to make a run if we were to sneak in with a final wild card. Very deep into the playoffs this year with how this team was constructed, and obviously without Hader. So I think it's just it'll be good for us to regroup, and there is quite a bit of hope that the guys that we acquired in the Hader trade, mainly Gasser and Ruiz, will become everyday regulars. Not everyday regulars, but everyday contributors to the Brewers. Obviously, I think Ruiz as a center fielder, second baseman, and Gasser. I mean, honestly, best case scenario, he could be Burns 2.0. Great scenario to be even if he became Eric Lauer 2.0. There's always a chance he become Ethan Small 2.0 and kind of become a disappointment before even reaching the majors. But you just don't know what you have there, and he's a great left-handed arm. And I think the Brewers brass really is. I really feel that they think he was one of the key pieces of that deal. And so I really have high hopes for him. So maybe I just have some hopes that we look back in a few years and realize that, that trade will lean in our favor at some point. It's a hard trade to swallow, obviously this year. So,
yeah. Hey, so Craig, on that point, do you think it's better almost that we didn't make the playoffs this year if we're trying to, kick the organization in the butt a little bit, just to make a bigger splash? I mean, I feel like if we would have made the playoffs, like you just said, I think we would have probably been a quick exit. I don't think that we're as talented this year as a number of the teams that have made the postseason, obviously. But, I think that sometimes there's been, it's the whole bite of the apple philosophy where you've got, as long as you're in the playoffs type of mentality, then it's been a successful year. And I don't think that this is a successful year. Even if the Brewers would have ended up winning an extra game against Miami this past weekend, and somehow the Phillies kept losing, we would have snuck in. I still don't think that makes this year a successful year. It's sort of like the 2020 season. I mean, and that was a weird year, obviously, but when you finish under 500 and you put up a banner and you get to say that you made the playoffs, another year, I get it, but it just seems like it's almost, obviously I wanted us to win, but it's almost maybe a good thing that the Brewers can't claim that this team that really underperformed was able to reach the postseason. I think it would have kind of created a lot of alibis and excuses for the front office. Maybe I'm wrong, but
No, I do agree. I think that's a good thing that the Brewers don't hang another wild card banner, or at least get the opportunity to hang another wild card banner this year.
Second wild card banner. I mean, come on, guys.
Actually, it would have been the third wild card banner this year, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, no. I mean, obviously, as a Brewer fan, it's hard to say no. I'm glad we missed the playoffs, so we get a kick in the butt.
No, and I'm not saying that. Just to be clear, but I'm just wondering if we could take that as a silver lining.
I hope, yeah, because I actually hope it's a kick in the butt to the front office, because and I guess before you drop Vikram off, your question was, I think, going to be something along the lines is this Mark Antonisio's fault for not spending more money to fix his team?
Yeah.
My short answer is I don't know for sure the answer to that, but my speculation is that Mark Antonisio is a pretty open-minded guy and a great with smart business sense. And I think that he is willing to save the money when a little bit when it's obviously not time, it's not the right time, but he's also going to be willing to add payroll when the time is right. And so I think if the front office came down and said, we want to go all in this year, we want to go for it, can we add 20 million in payroll at the deadline? He would have been open for it. But instead, I think it was shocked that they came down and said, hey, we actually want to trade Josh Hader because we think he's going downhill and now's the time to trade him, and we got these guys we like. And he's like, oh, okay, that you guys are running the show. I also like the fact that he's not as much of a micromanager as some owners across baseball, and so I think he really has faith in Arnold and Stearns, and that when they come to him, he gives his opinions and whatnot, but I think he really just lets them run the show, which I respect for him for that. So with that being said, I think that if anything comes out of the season that's good from a front office perspective is that Stearns and Arnold, knock on wood, that they are around next year, most likely, both of them, that they kind of learn that, hey, maybe there's a time to go for it instead of just getting bites of the apple. It's time. This is the year. Burns is leaving potentially. Woodruff is leaving soon potentially. Let's go for it. And I think next season is like the meat of the window. I mean, if you were talking about having like a 3-year window before those guys depart, or at least one of them, this would have been the first year of the window. Next year is the second, and then you don't really want to wait till that last year of the window because you want some flexibility if you'd have to trade one of those guys at the trade deadline or whatever of that third season of the window. So I really feel like next year, and that's why I love Vikram's prediction of the 2023 World Series, because really I feel like we do need to go on it next year. But we have so many question marks on offense, like the guys I mentioned with Yelich and Hero and Urias and whoever else is going to contribute to this team. There's so many question marks that it's hard to really envision that at this time. But like I said, if indeed there's the guys are smart enough, like, let's make a go for a trade, be willing to really trade a couple of key pieces, be willing to trade Garrett Mitchell for a better controlled bat, even if it's only for a couple seasons. Be willing to throw Ethan Small in that trade, even if you don't want to. Be willing to even include Trang if someone wants it. So I mean, I think that we've done something like that at this deadline, but I just don't know what maybe the correct players weren't there to acquire and whatever. So you just don't know, and I trust overall this front office to add as much talent as they can via trade and signings or whatnot, and they've shown them also be able to do that. So, all right, well, let's. Scott,
you could put me on record as saying that I think that Antonazio is a great owner, but I also think that, like most people in Wisconsin, he is a little frugal, and
he's
I think that, well, most people in Wisconsin, I don't know, he's there, he's part of Wisconsin now, like it or not, but
yeah,
I just think that if we didn't spend most of January, February, March, like just screwing around, trying to come together, trying to get a collective bargaining agreement figured out, and then that upset a bunch of fans. Numbers are down, revenue I'm sure is down, And I'm sure that, they said, hey, you know what? I don't really want to spend that much money. I think that's what it came down to. I think that if we had a collective bargaining agreement at the end of last year, then I think that this Brewer team makes the playoffs. I think we're a little bit more aggressive. I think that attendance stays up. I think we have a little more wiggle room with play roll. And we didn't do it. I'm sure that's not the only factor, but I think it was enough of a factor that I think that made us a little gun shy.
I will second your point, I think, Scott, because I do think that lockout and the uncertainty, more importantly, the uncertainty of a lockout affected small and medium-sized market teams more than big market teams, obviously. And I think that the Brewers seemed especially kind of put off by what happened. The whole normal off-season rhythm was thrown off. I mean, other small market teams, I'm thinking about Cleveland or Toronto, and Tampa still managed to deal with it and make the playoffs. So I think that only goes so far as a rationale, but maybe that's a factor. I don't know.
I did think it factored in, and I agree with Scott on this point for sure, is that it factored in how teams were able to build their rosters during this offseason big time. And I mean, that all really goes into where what your team's like going in the season. I think it's pretty obvious the Brewers, actually pulled off didn't they pull off like the last trade before the actual collective before the lockdown or whatever with the Hunter Renfroe trade? I think it was one of the last, not the last trade. So obviously there were some
like an hour before the deadline.
There was some pressure there that I think they were like, there's a lot of uncertainty on this team unless we pull off this trade right now. There's a lot, so I think it caused them to do that when they did, and whether or not that's good or bad, who's going to be the judge of that? But it definitely, that's just an example of across baseball how it was a huge dark cloud hanging over the heads of these front offices during the entire offseason. And it was a much more difficult offseason to build a roster for sure from top to bottom, especially like you said, for small market teams. You just can't have that much uncertainty as you approach the start of the season, unfortunately, a small market team. So all that stuff factored in, and it's just like we just have to look forward to next season. It's just like I don't want to adopt the Cubs fans mentality of like, well, I'll wait till next year, because the time is now, so to speak. And I thought of that this year, and I thought of that for next year. And so we're in our window, and we can't really blow this. I mean, we need to make a strong run. I think we have a strong enough base of a roster just based off of our unbelievable elite starting pitching alone. And we still do have Devin Williams at the back of the bullpen. And I think Matt Bush will rebound, and he's arbitration eligible next year. I'm sure he'll be a better contributor next year. Unfortunately, Taylor Rogers is, now a free agent. So we'll see. I think the Brewers will rebuild their bullpen fine, and they'll address the needs that they need to this offseason. And it'll be exciting 2023 season, like Vikram said, for sure. So unfortunately, though, let's move on to doing our annual playoff predictions. Unfortunately, we don't get to pick the Brewers this year, but just for fans, as we wrap up the 2022 regular season here, this will be the first year of this format, obviously, with the 6 playoff teams on each side of the league, for 12 total teams making the playoffs this year. So the top 2 division winners get byes, and in the American League, that of course the Astros and the Yankees, and then the third division winner, and then has to play with the 3 wild card teams on the opening weekend. There's going to be all 3-game series. In the American League, it will be the Rays playing in Cleveland for 3 games. Now, all 3 games will be in Cleveland, and the winner of that series will advance. And then the other wild card in the American League will be the Seattle Mariners, who made the playoffs for the first time in many, many years. And they will be, unfortunately, not even getting a home game. All 3, at least for the first season series, all 3 games will be in Toronto against the Blue Jays, with that winner advancing. And then, over in the NL, the top 2 division winners, of course, obviously the Dodgers, at the number 1 seed. and number 2 seed, returning NL champ, the World Series champ, Atlanta Braves did secure the number 2 seed. So they'll both get first round byes, and the other playoff matchups are Philadelphia Phillies will be playing at the St. Louis Cardinals, and the San Diego Padres will be playing at the New York Mets for the first 3 games, with those winners of both those series advancing to play the top seeds. So I guess what are overall predictions? If you just want to say what your favorite dark horse team is to possibly make a run, and then let's start on the AL side on both these. Your dark horse team for the AL, and then who do you think will meet in the AL league, the AL Championship Series, with the winner advancing to the World Series in the AL? Scott, do you want to start us off?
What? I didn't even understand half of that, but I don't know. What am I supposed to be doing? Picking
You're doing great.
everyone
Scott.
from each series? I don't even know who plays each
No,
other. I mean, I know
no.
you just said it, but
Yeah, no, and take your time, obviously, but he's saying pick your kind of sleeper team in the league, and then who's going to actually win the pennant, I think.
okay. In the AL sleeper team, I don't know, Toronto. And then I just figured the Yankees will win it because I don't know, why not?
I've got Cleveland as my sleeper team, and the Yankees winning it as well.
All right.
The Astros are really good this year. I mean, their offense is really good. I'm gonna say that the Yankees will actually win this.
All right. We'll pick the Mariners as my sleeper team, just because I like to root for them, but or my dark horse team. But I'll pick the Blue Jays versus the Astros in the League Championship Series, with the Blue Jays advancing to the World Series.
Wow.
Okay. And
Oh, great.
And the only reason
I can't wait to see how that affects the World Series when we have like the next COVID wave come out. That'll be awesome.
They're waiving the requirements, Scott. You're with it.
Are they? Really?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
Yeah, that's ending. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Starting not to trust Canada anymore. I don't know what they're doing, but I don't know if there's another new COVID wave. I would. Well, I don't know. I mean, compared to some of our other bordered countries, I think they're doing all right. No, I'm just kidding. They're all great. They're all great. But I just don't want that to become like a part of the game where it's going to be like, hey, people are going to have to get vaxxed or grab some pine. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there was a serious problem with Whit Merrifield actually when they acquired him at the deadline, because he was not vaccinated, and they made him get vaccinated if he wanted to continue to earn a salary. And
Scott, are you gonna be able to have your interns edit all this out of the podcast, because none of it's relevant anymore?
It's gonna be relevant if there's another COVID wave. That's what I'm saying.
I think that they're waiving
before
the rules
this
for real,
weekend?
though. So I don't think that it's
another COVID wave before Friday. That should happen.
I don't think that Canada has those rules in place anymore, Scott. Just for the record, for real.
All right. Well, that's good anyway. I mean, yeah. I don't know, because I just remember when we had like some of the series in Toronto, not Brewers, but like some of the other teams, and they couldn't travel or they couldn't play. And I'm like, it's kind of disappointing that you can't play, people on your team. Yeah. But all right, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's going to be over for the postseason, in time for the postseason.
Well, I'm glad it's not a thing anymore. So what are we doing now? NL?
Yeah. Why don't you do the National League? Because Craig just went. So why don't you do the National League?
Let's see. I'm going to pick the Dodgers to come out of there. And dark horse team. I don't know. In the NL, it's so weird. I'm not going to say the Cardinals because I don't want to.
I don't think it's who you want to think, right?
I don't trust the Padres. They on paper they should be there. I guess they're a dark horse team. They're limping into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I mean, not. I don't know. So as far as a dark horse, it's almost either them or the Phillies, and I just don't trust the Phillies at all either. So I'll say Padres.
I don't think that the Padres or the Phillies are going to come out of that. I'll pick the Mets as my dark horse team, I guess. Yeah, I have a hard time thinking that anybody can knock out the Dodgers this year, but stranger things have happened. I will say this on the record: I would prefer that the Cardinals win the National League if it was between the Cardinals and the Dodgers. My dislike of the Dodgers is pretty strong at this point as well. But that's not a neither would make me happy. I'm going to go with the Mets as my sleeper team, and my winner will be the Dodgers.
Cardinals.
No,
you just said you were going to pick the Cardinals or the Dodgers.
No. I like who I'd want to win.
It's like one of those. It's like every year.
We know you want the Cardinals to win.
My head says
the World Series. I mean, we already know that.
No, I prefer the Yankees to beat the Cardinals for sure.
So your dream?
I have to go through a collective bargaining agreement where we barely get to even have a season at all, and then I have to see a Yankees Dodgers World Series or a Subway Series, I am gonna effing lose it. I didn't wait all year for this.
I know. Yankees Braves would be kind of cool, right? That'd be sort of a nostalgic series. It's just that the Braves won it last year, so I'm not really as interested in them this season.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Phillies, I just don't think are that good.
Padres Mariners World Series there. That's Vikram's pick, I think.
I mean, at least then it would be somebody new, and then that would knock one of, because it's only what, them and the Brewers? Is that it?
No, the Rays haven't won a World Series.
Oh yeah.
The Rangers have never won a World Series. Mariners, Padres, Brewers. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Padres gotta be in it to win it. We're not.
So we're not one of the worst franchises of all time. We're bottom 5. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with a caveat that the Rays have
been.
only been there since 1998 as a franchise, but yeah.
Yeah, and they've been wildly. They probably have as many playoff appearances as we have. So.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean,
we have way better fans though. So screw. Way better. So, all right, you guys make your picks. All right, you did, I guess, in the NL. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Padres for a kind of a dark horse team. I have a funny feeling it'll be the Mets to emerge from the NL. I just think that there'll be a surprise team. So I'll go Mets first, Blue Jays in the World Series, and I'll have the Blue Jays winning.
But the Padres can't be your dark horse. You know they play the Mets in the first round.
Well, that's why I want to be my dark horse team, but
you want to win? Yeah, okay, got it.
Just like you want the Cardinals to win, but unfortunately the Dodgers are going to. But
between those two teams, definitely.
And I do think the Dodgers, with their 110 wins, I think they are beatable. I mean, they are missing Walker Buehler. I mean, and they don't have Max Scherzer like they did last. I think their team was way stronger last postseason. Now that's why I was ecstatic when they got knocked off, and then the Brewers would have a chance to not play them. But of course, we lost the Braves, and the rest is history, unfortunately.
Yeah, Tony Gonzalez is still kind of sort of hurt. Like, I mean, you don't know how he's gonna rebound or come back, so you can't necessarily count on him.
I guess I'm actually somewhat confident that the Dodgers will not win the World Series. I don't know. I just think they're gonna get knocked off. I don't know by who exactly, but I guess I'll go with the Mets.
Awesome.
We'll see. I mean, if you look at the Mets starting pitching versus the Dodgers starting pitching, it's almost as good. Now that DeGrom is back, and again, he doesn't necessarily have all the innings under him yet, but I mean, DeGrom and Scherzer is a pretty damn good 1-2 punch. And then obviously Chris Bassett's pretty good. I don't know. Yeah. And they have great bullpen, pretty decent hitting. I mean, they've got a franchise hitter in Alonso in the Miller lineup, and they've got pretty good complementary pieces. Like Brandon Nimmo is pretty damn good leadoff hitter, and Jeff McNeil just won the NL batting championship. So I mean, and they've got Francisco Lindor, another franchise type hitter. I mean, I get that they just got knocked, just disappointingly, Mets being Mets, and got knocked out by the Braves for the division crown this year. But that's why I think that makes them kind of a. I think people are writing them off, and I think they're going to roar back and knock off the Dodgers. But that's just my call. I don't know. So so I'm trying to remember. You guys both have the Yankees were in the World Series.
Yeah, I've got the Yankees winning the World Series. Yeah.
Versus, I forget who your NL pick was.
I picked the Dodgers. I don't want that.
Oh, Yankees, Dodgers, with the Yankees winning. Oh, that's fun. Okay, Scott, what was your?
You said the Yankees, Dodgers, with the Dodgers winning?
No, he said
Yankees, Dodgers.
I have Yankees. With who?
I picked Yankees, Dodgers with the Yankees winning.
Oh, okay. All right. Then I'll say Yankees. Well, I had Yankees, Dodgers, so I'll just say Dodgers winning. I don't know. You guys will have to let me know who wins because I won't even watch it.
Well, that's why it's going to be a Mets Blue Jays World Series. So hopefully you're watching, Scott. We'll see.
I don't know. Does the Mets Blue Jays World Series do anything for me? Not really.
Who would you want to win between the Mets and the Blue Jays, Craig?
There's still Blue Jays. I don't like the Mets.
Are you doing that? That's your actual prediction, or that's what you want?
Well, that's what I'm predicting.
Okay, all right.
Because I actually think that the teams that got the buys are going to be a disadvantage for sitting down for 4 days, and they're going to lose their momentum. And I actually think it's going to be the teams that get fired up by their home crowds that emerged from the first series in our first ever wild card 3-game series that are going to have the momentum to knock off the Goliaths this year. But we'll see. I'm also deep down wishful thinking on that. I mean, not that I'm a Blue Jays or Mets fan. I just have a funny feeling on both those. And actually, I did predict the Blue Jays to meet the Brewers in the World Series before the season, so I'm kind of sticking by that. And if you really look at the Blue Jays, they have a better team this year than what they've made the postseason the last couple of years, I think. I mean, first of all, Alex Manoah is pretty awesome. I mean, he's like an elite ace that they haven't had before, or he's emerged as one this year. And they also have Kevin Gausman this year, which they didn't have in previous seasons. And then, I mean, they have Jose Barrios as like their number 3 starter. So I think they're in pretty decent shape to win some short series in a playoff. And their offense is just bonkers good. I mean, George Springer at the top of the lineup. You got Bo Bichette hitting in there. You got Vladimir Guerrero, Matt Chapman, Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, top to bottom, compared to like the Brewers. I mean, no offense, the Brewers aren't even in, but I mean that's a pretty damn good team, in my opinion. And I get that the Dodgers are really good too. I just don't think. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, obviously all these teams are good teams, top to bottom, rotation, bullpen, offense for the most part because they won their divisions and whatnot, are in the playoffs. But I think it'll be a pretty interesting postseason. I'm just hoping for some surprise teams. And I think that the Braves were that last offseason. I think that the Blue Jays could be that team this year, but that's my guess. Obviously, some of the Astros, again, none of us mentioned the Astros even being in our World Series, but really, they're a great team.
Yeah. Yes, they are. They really are.
And so, I mean, they did far and away have a better record, and I think they're like 5 games better than the Yankees are. So, for the number 1 seed, I mean, I wouldn't write them off, especially with most likely AL Cy Young Award winner Justin Verlander pitching top of his game. I mean, they're very good candidates to win first series, and they've got pitching in spades, obviously, and hitting as well. So, I mean, I wouldn't write them off. I think a lot of people want to write them off, but I wouldn't. So
no, and selfishly, I'm pulling for that to happen. I want them to make the World Series this year. It's means more baseball close to where I live. I mean, I'm like 15 minutes from the stadium, so it's on a very selfish note. I hope that they go 7 games in the World Series. I mean, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I do think it. Yeah, we'll see. I have a feeling there's a lot of good teams in this postseason. It could be pretty interesting. Unfortunately, I do feel like the Cardinals will lose pretty quickly though, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Should be a pretty good postseason. Hopefully, I wish the Brewers were in it, but what can you do? So I will still be watching baseball. So and I'm definitely looking forward to a nice hot stove season for the Brewers. And hopefully all our fans will be tuning in as we'll bring you. And again, I know one of our next podcasts, we'll be talking about more playoff baseball, but we're also going to, on our next podcast, if we can remember to go over the 2023 rule changes that have been implemented. I know Scott had some things he wanted to say about that, and all of us do. So we'll make sure to get to that for our fans as well, as we kind of put that on the back burner. But I think it's gonna change baseball once again going in 2023 season. Just these rule changes that will be implemented.
And since we're leaving that as, we're using that as a cliffhanger, I guess, for the next episode. But I guess I will say this, like, isn't it a good idea that if you're going to implement rule changes, like you can only throw to first twice, they're going to, I guess, modify the shift or whatever. And we'll get more into it next week or whenever. Don't worry, guys. But wouldn't you like to see that get passed and say, hey, you know what? We passed this in 2022 and it's going to be 2025 opening day, so that like we actually have a little bit of time, like for teams to sort of adjust their rosters as needed, because like all these people are being, taught or trained or, brought up, developed to play baseball a certain way, and to just change it and say, oh, it's going to happen next year. Like, hey man, we've been building this roster for 5 years. Like, you can't just, why are we doing this? You know what I mean? I mean, obviously there's going to be some changes and, offense will probably pick up, and I don't know, it's just, I wish that it wouldn't just be done the very next year. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think you'd want to be able to opportunity to build your roster around the rules, so to speak. But I guess with all the teams being on the same playing field as having no advance notice and these ridiculous changes, I guess what can you really do? Baseball is,
it seems like everybody's at least in the same boat, though.
Yeah,
they are, but like, obviously teams with more lefties in their lineup are gonna see an improved offense, probably with a limited shift, and people with more speed and base stealers are obviously going to see an uptick in their offense. So, it'd be nice to kind of plan that a little bit, but, you have to, make adjustments, I guess.
we got the whole 2023 off season to figure this out.
Yeah,
I'm still mad that like the loogie is basically eliminated. I'm still mad about that. So like,
Brian Schultz is.
Yeah, if Brian Schultz was in his prime today, he wouldn't even be on a team. So
Brian Schultz is rolling around in his. Yeah, he's still with us, thankfully. He's rolling around.
Yeah, crazy. Oh, well, what can you do?
Well, yeah. Seems like a good show, guys. If not a good season, at least it's a good show.
Yep.
It's all right.
Yeah. I mean,
it's been a good run.
I think this podcast was a kind of a microcosm of the season, where it started off with a lot of promise and then kind of hit a snag somewhere in the middle, and then it didn't finish up all that well. But what can you do? It's still a pretty effort. We did the best of what we had to work with.
Yeah, Scotty, have you checked our email inbox, Brew Crew Review Podcast with an S?
I checked it a couple days ago, but all the questions we answered already off the air, so I can't remember. If there was like a really good one, we could have brought it up and discussed it now. But like, I don't know, like but we appreciate all of them. Obviously. Yeah.
If some of our listeners, if you could actually submit some good questions, that'd be, we could probably use those.
Also, Scott is very actively managing our Twitter account on social media, Brew Crew Review on Twitter. sure he's got to sign up for TikTok or whatever else.
See, and I was just gonna give a tip of the cap to you for doing a yeoman's work while I've been a little absent from there, but we sure appreciate it.
What's 10 months amongst friends, Scotty?
Oh man.
And then also, listeners, we're also going to dedicate an entire off-season podcast for us planning our 2023 Brew Crew Review host baseball trip. So you guys will want to tune in for that. I'm sure it'll be pretty exciting.
Oh, absolutely, guys! I can't wait. We're gonna set this thing up on the books. I will, Scotty, see you in Phoenix in April. Cannot wait.
And if any of you guys live, if our listeners live in Phoenix and also like dogs, we also might need your assistance in watching a small dog named Penny. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Scott, for what it's worth, Lena has actually volunteered to watch your dog during that time, but you have to get the dog to her, or she can, watch it.
Oh, that's incredible news.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Tell Lena, thank you very much. That's awesome. That's just amazing.
Yeah. So makes it easier. I figured we would
It's gonna happen.
give you zero reasons not to go.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait. I don't know, but I'm gonna hold true to my usual non-committal self. But I will also say that obviously dedicated listeners, if you're listening this long, obviously dedicated, so we definitely appreciate you. But we still have anonymous source Tom Carter to be able to, he's still, even though I guess he's no longer with the Brewers, like he's still our anonymous source, and he still has his finger on the pulse of everything else going on, in trade rumors and signing rumors. So I'm sure he's gonna, he's definitely gonna be funneling information to us, and we're obviously gonna relay it here, and we'll keep him anonymous the entire time. So it's gonna work out. So make sure to tune in for that.
Want to step forward? We'll protect your identity just as much as we do Tom Carter's. Well, guys, on that note, I think we should wrap this up. I think people have heard enough of us. So
and as of this taping, the Brewers still do have one game left against Arizona Diamondbacks tomorrow afternoon. I know Vince, you'll be attending that game. I would love to join you.
Yeah.
So with that being said, go Brewers. Stay classy.
Go Brewers, guys. Keep it classy with them.
Go Brewers 2023. Here we go.
Do, 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 do.